Welcome to Our by Halfling, where we talk about Lord of the Rings and a little about D&D, so let's get to it. So this week, we're going over Chapter 16 of the Silmarillion of Maeglin. In this chapter, we begin with Arthal Arfiniel, the White Lady of the Noldor, daughter of Fingolfin and sister of Turgon. Now she lived with Turgon in Nevras and moved with him to Gondolin. But Arthal was someone who really loved to wander around and be very free, and she didn't like much that Gondolin was very guarded, and she would ask Turgon over and over and over if he would allow her to leave, and he always denied her. He always told her no. It was, too dangerous. He didn't want anybody leaving Gondolin, and she just kept asking him over and over and over. And finally, Turgon goes, okay, I'll let you leave, but you are only allowed to go see their brother, Fingon, in Hithlum. And that was it. And that she would be accompanied by some of his men, and that as soon as she got there, she needed to hurry up and get back to Gondolin. And Arthal tells Turgon, look, I'm your sister, not your servant. You can't tell me what to do. And I'm going to go wherever I want to go. And if you want to send people with me, fine. If not, I'm still going to go by myself. And Turgon's like, look, I'm not going to deny you anything that's mine. I'm still going to send my men with you. But he didn't want her to be gone long. He trusts her, but he doesn't trust anybody else to hold their tongue and not reveal the entrance to Gondolin. And so Turgon, he does go ahead and send 3 of his lords with Arthal, telling them that she needs to go to Fingon at Hithlum, and that they need to be very cautious, that even though Morgoth is, tucked away in the north, there's still a lot of other dangers, things that Arthal isn't aware of, and that they need to be cautious about. And so Arthal leaves, and it says that Turgon is left with a very heavy heart. He's very unsure about this. So when Arthal and the 3 lords come to the ford of Brithiak at Sirion, she tells them, look, go south. I'm not going to Hithlum. I'm going to go see the sons of Feanor, my old friends. So you guys aren't going to go that way. You guys can go ahead and go south. And seeing that they couldn't persuade her any other way, they go ahead and go towards Doriath. However, once they get there, Thingol is like, no, you guys aren't allowed to come in here. The only people allowed to come through Doriath are kin of the House of Finnerfin, because they're still his kin, and that they need to go away. All of the Noldors are not allowed into Doriath, especially those that are friends of Feanor. And so the lords return back to Arthal, kind of let her know, hey, you can either go north or south of Doriath, but you can't go through Doriath. And that there is a quick path that you can go through that will take you to Celegorm and Currifin. Well, this path goes from Brithiak through Dimbar, over the bridge of Escalduin and the fords of Aros, coming to the hill of Himring. And if you remember back to our journey through Beleriand, this is right through Ergorgra. This is through Ungoliant's home that they're telling the White Lady of Gondolin to go through. And they tell her, this is a very dangerous path. And Arthal's like, well, I'm going to go that way anyways. And so they go through the valley of Gorgrath, and as they get closer to Nan Dungortheb, the party gets separated. Arthal gets separated from the 3 lords. And the lords are now trying to find Arthal, but they can't. And they're afraid that she's either been ensnared in one of the webs, or that she's drunken from the poison water. And in the middle of their searching, they awaken and send alert to some of the creatures of Ungoliant, who now are chasing them. And they barely escape with their life, and now have the awful duty of having to go to Turgon and telling him that his sister has died. However, Arthal is not dead. And she does try to find her companions, but doesn't succeed, and she continues forward fearlessly and bravely. She gets through, and she comes to Himlad, where Celegorm and Currifin live. However, Celegorm and Currifin are gone. They're not there when she arrives. But the people of Curufin welcome Arthal. They beg her to stay. They hold her in great honor. And so Arthal is like, yeah, I'll stay for a little while. So she does. She stays. It says she's very content and is filled with joy for a time because she's able to wander freely and ride around. And this is what she's been wanting to do. But time goes by. A year is approaching. Still no Curufin or Celegorm. So she starts becoming a little restless and she starts wandering a little further, a little further, a little further. And eventually she gets to the edge of Nan Elmath. And in these woods is where Melion and Thingol, or Elwë, met. And so these woods are full of tall trees, and it still has some of Melion's enchantment. And in this forest now lives Eol, who was named a dark elf. He is kin to Thingol, but when Melion set up her girdle, he didn't like this idea, and so he left and went to Nan Elmath. And here he stays hidden in the trees. He's not a fan of the sun. He only desires to be under the stars, and he hates the Noldor. He puts a lot of the blame on of what's going on with Morgoth and all of the just everything. He blames on the Noldor. If it's something bad, it's the Noldor's fault. And Eol, however, is extremely close with dwarves. It says that he is closer than any of the other elven folk, and that he learned much from the Nagrim, as well as telling them about what was kind of happening in the lands of the Eldar. And often Eol would dwell with the dwarves. He learned how to make work with metal and how to create his own metal that was as hard as the steel of dwarves, and he named it Galvorn. It was very light and malleable, and it was resistant to blade and darts, and he would wear it all the time. Anytime he was traveling, he had his armor on. Well, Eol, who it says that he is very noble looking but very grim face, and that he was able to see in dark places. He had very keen eyesight. And one night he sees Arthal. He sees this white glimmer in the shadow of all these trees, and he desires her. He thinks she's gorgeous and wants her for himself. And so he sets an enchantment upon her so that basically she cannot find her way out of the woods and that she will only be guided to his home. So now Arthal finally comes to his home, and she's tired and weary, lost and confused. And Eol comes in with his, handful of servants, comes in and guides her into his home. And it says that she's there for a long time, and Eol makes her his wife, and that it is a long time before anyone hears from Arthal again. Now, I want to point out that Tolkien did feel the need to say that she was not wholly there unwillingly. That's curious. So Eol commanded Arthal, this free-spirited woman, that she was no longer allowed to ride under the sun, and he would take her on these twilight walks. And it kind of sounds like this is done as a way to appease this wandering need that she has, because he does not want her to go and see the sons of Feanor. He detests them and hates them over any of the other Noldor, and he does not want her to have anything to do with them. So he kind of does these twilight walks to kind of keep her from wandering on her own. And after some time, Arthal bears a son for Eol. And it says that she names him in her heart Lomion, which means child of twilight and Noldor. But Eol didn't give their son a name for 12 years. And finally he calls him Maeglin, or sharp glance. And Eol, it says that he sees that his son has eyes that were more piercing than his own, and that Maeglin can know people's hearts without any words being spoken. Maeglin was a very intuitive person, and it almost seems like he can kind of read minds. In a way, it seems like that's just Maeglin is just very perceptive and intuitive of people's feelings and thoughts. And it says that Maeglin looked more like a Noldor, but behaved and had the mind and manners of his father. And Maeglin spoke very little, but he was someone that when he did speak, people stopped and listened. They wanted to hear what Maeglin had to say. And so he very much commanded a room. It says that he was tall with black hair, with dark but bright, keen eyes, and had very fair skin. It says often that Maeglin would go with Eol on his travels to be with the dwarves, and that Maeglin learned much from the dwarves. That he learned how to work with metal, but he especially learned how to find ore in the mountains. And though Maeglin traveled a lot with Eol, he was much closer with his mother. And when Eol would be gone without him and his mother would spend time talking about the Noldor, about Turgon and Gondolin, and Maeglin loved these stories, and he particularly loved the stories about Turgon because he noted to himself that Turgon didn't have an heir; he only had a daughter, and so that was something that Maeglin kind of took note of, and he wanted to know how to get to Gondolin, and he would try to read his mother's mind, but she kept that very guarded. And so Maeglin just kind of hoped that getting her to talk about Turgon and Gondolin, or maybe if she got tired or something, that basically he would just kind of whittle away and sort of wear her down and eventually find out the entrance to Gondolin. So this is something that he shared with Eol, what his intentions were. And Eol was extremely upset by this. He did not like that his son was wanting to have anything to do with the Noldor. He used to saying that, you're my son, you're not a son of Gondolin. The land that they live on belongs to the Teleri, that they are simply, kinslayers, invaders, and usurpers of home. Like, I don't want you to have anything to do with these people. And if you do try to have something to do with them, I'm going to bind you. I'm not going to let you leave our home. Well, Maeglin just doesn't say anything. He gets very cold and silent and distant from his father, and after this, he no longer travels with Eol. So now it comes to midsummer, and the dwarves have a tradition of having this feast, and they invite Eol to Nagrad to, to join them. And Maeglin and Arathal are now free for a time away from Eol. And Maeglin now takes this time to convince Arathal that, they are in bondage. They need to escape Eol. They need to go, and this is their chance to get away from Eol and go to Gondolin. And it says that Arathal is like very proud of her son and is like, yes, let's do this. She was already kind of getting these feelings about, talking with Maeglin about Turgon and Gondolin. She was having these desires again to go and, revisit her home, revisit her brother. And so having Maeglin now be like, let's go, this is our chance. You can be the guide, I'll be the guard. Arathel is proud and she's like, yeah, let's do this. So they tell the servants that they are simply going to Celegorm and Curufin to visit. And that's it. And they run off in secret. And they continued on to the fords of Aros. Well, Eol returned home a lot quicker than Maeglin was expecting him to. And he gets home only 2 days after they've left. And so he's asking, like, where are my wife and son? He's told that they've gone to Celegorm and Curufin, and he is angry. So angry that this elf that refuses to be in the sunlight rides in the sunlight to, the sons of Feanor to find his wife and son. And it says that when he finally gets to Himlad, that he kind of realizes the danger that he's in now, because Celegorm and Curufin do not like Eol whatsoever. So he kind of calms down and sort of like becomes a little bit more cautious of his situation. Well, Curufin was told 2 days prior that Maeglin and Arathel were riding through their land, and he kind of realizes, like, this is kind of fishy. So he goes south to the pass to see what's going on, and at this time is when Eol is captured and taken to Curufin, and Curufin's like, what are you doing here? What's the deal? You never come here. Why would a dark elf be riding in the sunlight? What's going on here? And Eol, knowing his situation, it says that he holds his tongue. He's very cautious about what he has to say, and just says, that he was told that his wife and son were here to visit, and he thought it would be a good idea if he came along. And Curufin laughs at this and says, like, if they were here, their welcoming would be much colder if you arrived with them. But they're not here. They were seen passing 2 days ago. So either you're lying to me or someone has lied to you. And Eol asks here if he can be given leave to pass and, to find out what the truth is, what's really going on. And Cutterfin says, yes, you can leave because the sooner you leave, the better. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And so Eol mounts his horse and says that it's good to find kindness, in need, and that Eol will return this kindness to Cutterfin if ever he's in need. And Cutterfin tells Eol, don't try to flatter me with your wife's title. You are an elf that stole a daughter of the Noldor and didn't get any gifts for your wedding. And yeah, so don't expect that your marriage to a Noldor makes us kin, because we're not. And I don't want to have anything to do with you. And Cúrfin does stop and say that it would be better if Eol returned home. That for him to go off and find people who have obviously don't love him, who've left him, it would be better for him to go home, because Cúrfin's heart says, is telling him that if he continues on this journey, he will never come home. Well, Eol doesn't want to hear this. He's mad now and gets on his horse and takes off. And he is, again, filled with hatred and anger for the Noldor, because now he realizes where they're going. He realizes now that they're going to Gondolin. And so he's mad. He feels like, the Noldor are taking his son and wife away from him. So he begins to, go in the direction that Arathel and Maeglin were going. And he's having a hard time kind of seeing them, but their horses give them away eventually when they finally get to, the mountains of Gondolin. And he can see in the distance, Arathel's white garment going into the mountains. And so he stealthily sneaks behind them and sees the entrance. Well, Arathel and Maeglin are greeted at the outer gate of Gondolin by the Dark Guard, and they receive her with great joy, because all this time they believe that Arathel has been dead, and now to see her and see her with a son, they're ecstatic. And so they bring the two of them through the seven gates and then to Turgon on Amon-Gwareth. And Turgon listens to everything Arathel has to say, and he is filled with joy. He says that now Gondolin is brighter now that she has returned and she's alive, and that everything's just great. And that Maeglin, he sees is very much, looks like a Noldor, and says that Maeglin shall have the highest honor in his realm. So Maeglin tells Turgon, you are my king, you are my lord, I will do whatever it is you ask me to do. And Maeglin says he stands in silence, just looking at the wonder and the glory of Gondolin, just kind of soaking it all in. But that his eyes are most often drawn to Idril, daughter of Turgon, who has this golden hair. She's very much in likeness of her mother, who was a Vanyar. And it says that Maeglin believes that all the light that, that's in the king's hall, all, originates from Idril, that she's just light, all the source of light is coming from her. Now, Eol was trying to sneak into Gondolin, but is caught. And he tells the guards, who his wife is, who his son is, and, that they need to let him go. So the guards go to Turgon. They tell him, who Eol is claiming to be, and that they haven't killed him, which the law demands them to do. And Arathel goes, oh, this is what I feared. I was worried that Eol would come after us, and he must have been very stealthy for us to have never heard or seen him. But what he says is true. Bring him to Turgon so that the king can, choose what to do with him. And so Eol is brought to the king, and it says that he stands there very proud and sullen, and he's amazed like his son at Gondolin, but all this does is just make him feel more hatred towards the Noldor. So Turgon, however, treats Eol with great honor and respect. It says that he stands from his seat and he goes to Eol, giving his hand, saying, welcome, kinsman, because that's how I see you. you can live here happily with your wife and son, because as my law commands, you cannot leave here. And Ao says, I don't care about your law. I just want my wife and son back. This land is not the Noldor, it's the Teleri. You have no right to this land, and the Noldor have only brought trouble. And Ao says, I don't care about your secrets. I'm not going to tell anybody anything. I just want what's mine. And, Arathel is your sister, so if you want to lay claim to her, go for it. But my son is mine, and he's coming home with me. And Ao goes to Maeglin and tells him, like, we're leaving, we need to go. You're not going to have anything to do with these kinslayers. And Maeglin does nothing. He stands still and doesn't say anything. So Turgon sits back down, and it says that he's holding his staff of doom. And he tells Eöl in a very stern voice that he's not going to debate with him, this dark elf, and that Eöl needs to remember that the only reason that he could have traveled as far as he has is because the Noldor have protected the land. That the only reason why his woods, his home, is safe is because it's guarded by the Noldor, and he needs to recognize that his safety is due to the Noldor, and without them, he would possibly be in the depths of Angband as some slave. Well, Eöl, it says he looks right at Turgon this whole time. And Turgon tells him that he has two choices. He can either live here happily or die here. And the choice goes also for Maeglin. So Eöl doesn't say anything for a minute. It says he stands in silence. And Arathel becomes afraid because she knows Eöl is dangerous and she doesn't know exactly what he's going to do. And in that moment, it says like a snake, Eöl pulls out this javelin from behind his back and he throws it at Maeglin, saying, the second choice I take, and for my son also, you shall not hold what is mine. But Arathel dives in front of the dart and gets speared in the shoulder. And in this moment, all the guards jump on top of Eöl and bind him, and they begin to take him away as others tend to Arathel. And it says that Maeglin looks at his father in silence. And here it's decided that Eöl is going to be brought to the king the next day. And Arathel and Idril beg Turgon to have mercy. And it says that they do move him to mercy. But that evening, Arathel becomes extremely sick. It says that she begins to be cast into darkness. And that night she dies. And that they realize that the tip of the dart on the javelin was poisoned. And they learned it too late. So now Eöl is brought to Turgon without any mercy. And Eöl is taken to the Caragdur, a precipice of black rock on the north side of Gondolin. And it's here that he's to be cast over to his death. And Maeglin stands by, says nothing. And Eöl's last words are to Maeglin, so you forsake your father and his kin, ill-gotten son. Here shall you fail of all your hopes, and here may you yet die the same death as I. So here, Eöl is cast over the precipice and falls to his death. And it says that everyone in Gondolin feels this death is entirely justified, except for Idril, who didn't like what was done, and I guess like the fact that no mercy was shown. And it says that from here on out she doesn't have any trust for her people. But Maeglin, however, he prospers and thrives under Turgon and in Gondolin and gains Turgon's favor. And it says that Maeglin was very quick and like eager to learn all that he could learn of the Noldor, and that he was also quick to teach all that he had learned from the dwarves, especially how to retrieve the metal from the mountains, and that he taught them how to make stronger and just more efficient armor, and that the armor in Gondolin was much stronger under Maeglin. It says Maeglin was very wise and valiant, and that he would prove his worth when in the year of Ninyath Arvidad he would ride to battle with Turgon to aid them in Fingon, and it says that he was fearless in battle. So Maeglin is doing great, and it says that he was held mighty among the princes of the Noldor. However, Maeglin kept his true desires secret, and if things didn't quite go his way, he would take it in stride, but it was something that kind of kept building in him. And it said that he guarded his thoughts from everyone except Israel. He desired her greatly and couldn't find joy in anything except wanting to be with her. However, the Eldar didn't marry their kin, and Idril didn't like the fact that Maeglin wanted to be with her. She kind of found that creepy, but it really didn't matter even if they could get married, because it says that she had no love for Maeglin. She didn't like him at all. And knowing how he felt about her just made her love him even less. Like, she didn't like him at all. And she thought, it was creepy. And it says that the Eldar kind of believe that this is part of the curse from the kinslaying, and just sort of a manifestation of Mondos's doom. But for years, Maeglin would just watch Idril and kind of just desire her more and more, until his love eventually just turned to evil, and that all he wanted was for his will to be done. All he wanted was power, and that was it. And it says that so it was in Gondolin, and bliss and glory, an evil seed was sown. So that's it for this chapter. Some thoughts. Arithel could have been stinking amazing if she was allowed to not to do her own thing. Her story is kind of sad, in my opinion, because she's basically trapped in this one area with her brother, and when she does get the freedom to go away, she just gets trapped by another man, and it's kind of sad. I feel like when she talks to Turgon in the beginning, she's filled with this boldness, this is what she wants to do, this is what's going to happen, deal with it. And she goes through let's not undercut the fact that she went through the valley of Gorgoroth not once but twice. That's pretty baller, in my opinion. So, she was a strong woman, and she just gets trapped by Eol, who is very, very possessive. And I feel like Arethal's character with Eol is very different from where she began. She didn't have this boldness anymore to do what she wanted to do. She was doing what her husband wanted her to do, which I guess, maybe there was some obligation and responsibility in her mind that, this was her husband now. She had a son now. She needed to, abide to her husband. I don't know. It's just sad that it required her son basically to say, this is our time. We're in bondage. Our, Eol is possessive. We need to get out of here. And, she still ended up following her son, in a sense. I don't know. I just feel bad for Arethal. I think she could have been, if she was allowed to kind of wander and do what she wanted to do, and if she came in contact with the sons of Feanor, and I'm just wondering, could she have become this great warrior or something? I don't know. Maybe that's stretching it a little bit, but I feel like Arethal had a lot of potential, but just fell in the hands of very possessive men. And ultimately that was her doom. And I also want to point out two things. One, once again, it's really weird that Tolkien had to specify that she wasn't there entirely unwillingly. That's a little fishy. Two, the fact that when they were in Gondolin and Eol is just sort of standing there very fiercely, being given now these two choices to live here or die here, Arethel says that she is worried about what Eol is about to do, because he's dangerous. That's concerning to me. Nobody thinks somebody is dangerous unless they've already done something to require you to think that they're dangerous. So I don't know. I don't want to put anything on this outside of the text, but Eol kind of seemed possessive and maybe a little bit like an a-hole. His name is fitting, I guess. So yeah, and then Maeglin is a creeper. Dude's creepy. It was weird to me that in all the stories that Arethel was telling him, he kind of latched on to the fact that Turgon didn't have an heir. That was sort of red flag when I was reading it. And then the fact that it seemed like he was almost, I don't know if he was necessarily bragging, but definitely looking to Ao for approval for him trying to gain the secret from his mother. Like, his mother was wanting to keep something private, and he was trying to manipulate the situation to retrieve the secret. And Ao obviously gets onto him for totally different reasons than he should have been getting onto him. But that was creepy. And then wanting to be with his cousin, like, I don't know, trying to keep in perspective, like, it's not totally unusual in, like, in history for people to marry their cousins, but usually it's like a third or fourth cousin. It's never your first cousin. That's gross. And so it's weird that Maeglin is wanting to do that, but maybe that plays part in the fact that he was also, you know, secluded from everybody else. I mean, it kind of makes it sound like he was only allowed to be in Nan Elmath with his father, mother, and a handful of servants, or with dwarves. That was it. There wasn't a whole lot of in between. So maybe Idril was like, well, you're not my mom and you're not a servant. You're certainly not a dwarf. So I don't know if maybe that played a part in the creepiness. I don't know. It's just weird and creepy. And yeah, Maeglin also has a very possessive feeling in reading him. And yeah, we're going to get to hear more of Maeglin and his evil journey. So yeah, we get more of Creeper Maeglin. And then Ao. In reading this, I was very conflicted with Ao. He is possessive, for sure. And he's very hateful to the Noldor, but I kind of wonder if that is more out of fear of what the Noldor can do. He knows what the Noldor have done. He knows that they've killed Teleri, and that's the Sindar's kin. So maybe he feels like, you know, there's this fear that they can do that to him too. And I mean, you gotta admit, like that fear of the Noldor taking things away from him was kind of fulfilled, albeit probably like a self-fulfilled prophecy, because he kept his family so like tight and under wraps that, you know, they wanted something else. And so they learned, you know, they talked about the Noldor and Gondolin. And I mean, I can kind of see how how Ao was like, the Noldor are just once again taking more from me. They've taken, you know, my kin, they've taken land, now they're taking my wife and son. And so I can kind of see his fear, but it definitely doesn't justify his possessiveness. But I think you can see that his possessiveness is underlined with his fear of what the Noldor can take from him. And yeah, it was just a self-fulfilled prophecy. They ended up taking, you know, his son and wife from him, but because of his choices. And then ultimately, because of his choices, he made bad choices and lost his life. So I don't know. This story, this chapter is just a tragedy all around. Everybody just has a sad story, and I'm really worried about Idril. I don't know how much more we'll get to hear from her. I'm sure we'll hear more, but I'm concerned for her safety with Maeglin there. It's concerning. But yeah, this is this chapter. It was a doozy. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I did. I like these little self-contained chapter stories, and this is perfect. So I enjoyed reading this. Felt creepy and uncomfortable with the characters, but I still enjoyed it. So I hope you guys did too. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and may your homes be filled with food and cheer. Bye.